everybody. We're going to get started here. Welcome to Hints and Herrings. We're going to be talking about how to write foreshadowing into your story, as well as including red herrings. Does anybody know what foreshadowing is? James?
Where you foretell a shadow.
You don't have, doesn't have anything to do with shadow. But you have the right idea of foretelling. So foreshadowing is where you are specifically dropping hints and clues about something that's going to happen later on in the story. Okay, and we're going to come to a rule about that called Chekhov's gun a little bit later. But a red herring, it has nothing to do with a fish. A red herring is a clue that is dropped intentionally by the writer to confuse or distract the reader or the audience from something else. And we'll come to that in just a moment. For those of you who have never been to one of my workshops, my name is Garrett K. Jones. Let me back up. This is our agenda for the day. We're going to define foreshadowing. We'll talk about examples of foreshadowing. It's all just a red herring. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about classic misdirection, and then I have a writing prompt for you guys, and then we'll do the conclusion. But for those of you who are not familiar with me, my name is Garrett K. Jones. I'm an author and podcast host. My bachelor's degree is in creative writing. I have a book series called The Archives of St. Gran, which has 5 books currently in the series, 4 of which, the first 4, are here at the library for checkout if you are interested. I host 2 podcasts, or well, co-host. One is called Storytellers, which is an independent podcast, and then I'm a co-host on War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. And then I do a YouTube channel called The Right Way, where we talk about book recommendations, author interviews, and creative writing tips. So, yes, what's your name?
I'm Noah, and my question is, how do we actually find your podcast?
I will have links for that at the end of the writing workshop, okay? Awesome. And then, as far as my favorite genre to read, I love science fiction. I read a lot of it, but lately I've been getting into thrillers and suspense a lot more, just because I've kind of matured into that kind of thing. But I do love science fiction. So let's jump right into it. All right, we're going to be talking about defining foreshadowing. So foreshadowing is a warning or an indication of a future event. Okay? This is where you drop a hint that is going to let your reader know that something is going to happen later on in the story. All right? And then there is, let me adjust that focus, see if maybe I can get it tighter.
Do you mind if I can write it out?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Noah, whatever helps for you to take notes, go for it. Okay, so these are usually scenes that build suspense. They build anticipation, or they build understanding. Okay? So that's what these events do. So case in point, one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid is the 1989 Batman movie. And at the so if you know anything about Batman, you know that Batman's parents are killed in front of him when he was a kid, about the age of 7 or 8.
I don't think I've actually ever seen a Batman.
Whoa. Well, you might still be a little young for it. I don't know. I'll let your parents decide on that.
I tried watching the Batman movie, but my mom stopped me before I could.
The newer one is a little bit. It can be a little violent.
I was talking about the Lego Batman.
Oh, Lego Batman. Oh, it's fine.
He said it was scary.
Well, toys coming to life, pretending to be characters. That might be a little terrifying.
No, I don't think that it's terrifying at all.
I'm kidding. So anyway, at the beginning of this film, there's a family that are walking around downtown Gotham City, and they're trying to find their way across town by foot. They're trying to get a taxi cab, and they end up going down an alley past someone who's asking for money. And right off the bat, for anyone who's familiar with Batman's origin story, the first thing you think of is, oh my gosh, this is Thomas and Martha Wayne, and the kid is a young Bruce Wayne. Come to find out, it's not them. Everything just goes very similarly without the parents being shot. And then Batman shows up just 5 minutes later on screen and beats up on the thugs. But that's a little bit of foreshadowing because you get this idea of what Batman is wrestling with. Because then fast forward about 2/3 of the way through the movie, he has a flashback of remembering what happened to his parents and how similar that scene is from the opening of the movie. All right, so that's a little bit of foreshadowing right there. It builds the suspense, it builds the anticipation, it builds the understanding of the character or the setting. Okay? These scenes establish later plot development. All right, something that's going to happen later on in the plot. Okay? It might be one of the things that I really like in the Harry Potter franchise is if you ever read the books, if you ever watch the movies.
I watched the movies.
Okay. Is that things that are introduced at the beginning of the story are later things that pop up in the story. So, for example, in the first book, The Sorcerer's Stone, when Ron is sitting there playing wizard's chess against Hermione, and Harry sees it, that is foreshadowing for what's going to happen later on when they're trying to prevent Voldemort from getting the Sorcerer's Stone. Yes?
Why, what does that have to do with,
Defining?
defining?
So I'm providing you an example. Because that scene established a later plot development.
Later?
Yeah. Okay? All right. This can be something, so these are some examples. A character can offhandedly say something that bad things always happen to them in autumn. Okay? So if I'm a character and I say, bad things always happen to me in autumn, what would trigger you guys as the reader to feel concerned for me as a character later on in the story? Okay, I'm walking around, it's a beautiful, brisk autumn day. You already know that something bad is going to happen to me. What is something in autumn time, in that season, that would trigger you to worry about me?
Well, if I was like Harry Potter and you were Hagrid, and I was worrying that a demon might attack you.
Well, let's be more focused, Noah. I like the idea of what you're going with that, but let's be a little bit more focused. What is one thing that happens in the fall when you have the change of seasons? We go from summer to fall, what happens?
To the trees.
The trees. The trees change color. The leaves start falling off the branches. Okay? If I'm walking along my day and I'm seeing, and I'm just going about, you as the audience already know that something bad is going to happen to me as soon as the season changes. When those leaves change color and start falling, that's going to pique your concern for me. Yes, James?
How does that have to do anything with
Because I've already established by commenting about it, the bad things. Because the trees indicate the change of season. If I'm walking around right at the end of summer going into fall, and the trees start changing color and the leaves start falling, that means something bad is going to happen to me. Because I know that I've already made the statement that something bad is going to happen to me.
I thought you meant that the trees would do something.
No, the trees aren't going to do anything unless I run into a tree, and that would really suck.
Unless it's like the third movie.
But we're not just focusing on Harry Potter. So, another thing that can set the tone for foreshadowing is dark and stormy weather. Dark and stormy weather usually indicates maybe difficult times traveling. Usually it's indicative of something scary that could happen. Most classic horror movies have dark and stormy weather involved in it in some way, shape, or form. Maybe characters secretly having something in common. Okay? You see this happen with a lot of characters. Their philosophies might be different about how they handle things, but but in their philosophies, they still have some kind of commonality. Case in point, Batman and Superman. Both of them were orphans at some point in their lives. Superman is the last son of Krypton. Batman is the last son of Thomas and Martha Wayne. They have that in common, but how they act as heroes is very, very different. Superman wants to be a beacon of hope. He's out in the daytime. He lets people see him, and this is the real him. Batman, on the other hand, operates in the shadows. He operates at nighttime. He does not want to be a symbol of hope. He wants to be a symbol of fear. He wants to be both operate as symbols of justice, but they're very different in how they operate, because while they have those things in common, what they do and how they do it are different. For example, maybe it's the way that a character talks. A great example is the movie Anchorman. There is a scene at the very beginning where it is established that Ron Burgundy, the Anchorman, played by Will Ferrell, will read anything on a teleprompter. Anything. And it comes back halfway through the movie where someone puts something on a teleprompter that he should never say on network television, and he reads it without even thinking about it. It's a very, very bad word that should never be heard on TV. He says it, everyone freaks out. He has no clue that what he has said until after they show him the video clip. And then he's like, oh no, and they have to fire him. James. Teleprompter is a screen that you read, and it has the thing that you're reading so that you can look at the camera and not look like you're reading on a piece of paper. All right, so these are all examples of foreshadowing. Another thing is a quote or a piece of dialogue that is specifically said or repeated throughout a series. One of my favorites that always comes to mind is from Star Wars. It's the phrase, "I have a bad feeling about this." It's very cliche, and the moment that a character says this, something bad is going to happen. Okay? And what's funny is, it actually gets repeated through every single Star Wars movie ever made. And this is the list of characters who say it. In fact, it is said by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Han Solo more than any other character in film. Okay? Han Solo says it twice. Obi-Wan Kenobi says it twice. And then everything else is either Anakin, Luke, a droid, or Princess Leia. Or Lando at the very end. Alright, so whenever someone says, "I have a bad feeling about this," something goes haywire. Alright, for example, like when Luke Skywalker says, "I have a bad feeling about this," it's right when they are in view of the Death Star, and they think it's just a moon, and nope, it's not. They get pulled in on a tractor beam right into the hangar bay, and they're in the heart of the Empire, with Darth Vader breathing down their necks. Alright? So, let's talk about some rules when it comes to foreshadowing. Because this is really, really, really key. Alright, the first rule. You want to make the foreshadowing relevant. It needs to have purpose and meaning for your story. Not every story event needs an early warning or a clue, but don't make foreshadowing trivial. Okay? For example, that Star Wars reference of "I have a bad feeling about this," for me, as classic as it is, it feels a little trivial because every time you hear that phrase, something bad is going to happen. It gets overplayed, it gets overused. It's actually stronger for the story if you don't give a warning sometimes, not every time, because then it allows for something to happen in a way that you don't expect. Okay? And you want to keep it significant. You want to keep it for significant plot events. So, for example, one of the things that I do when I'm looking at my characters, when I'm developing my stories, I am very specific about the names that I pick. Okay? I'm specific about where the word comes from, where, what, and how that plays in. So, for example, in my first book, I have a character named Gavin. All right? The name Gavin comes from Old English. It means little hawk. All right? Now, there's nothing about him that is hawk-like. There's nothing bird-like about him. Actually, he is a ranger with a pet dragon about the size of a house cat that sits on his shoulder. But I play into that idea because the dragon, whose name is Nex is a hunter, and because they roam around the wilds of their country, Gavin and Nex hunt for their food. They live off the land, just like a little hawk would do. Okay? One of them actually flies. One of them actually is technically a predator, while the other one is a human who lives off the land with his companion. All right? So that's rule number one. You want to make sure that the foreshadowing is relevant. Rule number two, you need to understand the purpose of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing tells readers to pay attention to a character's actions, decisions, or to an object. Okay? And it builds the suspense or whatever causes the plot. So, in this case, I want to jump back to my example of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Everything that Harry encounters from the very beginning is used to foreshadow what's going to happen at the end of the story. So, when he goes to Gringotts and he hears about the vault that Hagrid has to go into, he's told that it's kept secret. He's told that he's not supposed to know anything about it. And later on, we find out that same vault gets burgled at the bank in Gringotts. Okay? Someone tries to break into that vault to steal whatever was in there. But whatever's in there is no longer there because Hagrid's taken it. Okay? Everything that you see as far as the classes that Harry takes in the beginning of the film or in the beginning of the book, like herbology, or the charms class, like when he's learning about how to levitate something, Wingardium Leviosa, those things come back into play at some point. The lesson about Wingardium Leviosa. Ron is having a terrible time mastering this spell. It's a very basic, very simple spell. He struggles with it. And he gets upset because Hermione is so good at it. She's got to be that perfect student. She's that A+++ student, right? And that frustrates him. But later on, he goes in to protect her from the troll, and she has to coach him through using the spell. And so that spell, which was introduced early on, foreshadows the fact that it's going to have to be used. Okay? It needs to have a point and a purpose to it. And so we want to talk about payoff. Your foreshadowing needs to give the payoff. If you introduce an element in your story, make sure it belongs in the story. And this is where we come to the rule of Chekhov's gun. If there is a gun introduced in Act 1, it must go off before the end of Act 3. So if you've got a story broken down into 3 acts and you introduce something, it has to be included. It has to be used. All right? You don't want to leave something like that hanging for some future event and not get to it. And we'll talk about threading foreshadowing in for like a series, but if you're doing a one-off story and you introduce something, that thing that you introduce, whether it's a character, whether it's an idea, whether it's a location, whether it's an object, it has to come back into play before the end of the story. It has to. Otherwise, it is purposeless, it is meaningless, and it doesn't do anything to serve the story. It's just there. Okay? One of the worst examples of foreshadowing also comes from Star Wars. And this is in Episode 7, The Force Awakens. At the very beginning of the story, we are given this idea that there's something mysterious about Rey and about her family and about who her parents are. It is set up as this mystery box for us, and we don't get any payoff on that. And then when it comes back around in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, we're told that her parents were nobodies. Her parents sold her for drinking money, and they bailed on her. And then, in The Rise of Skywalker, we're told, oh, no, sorry, she's actually the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, the worst guy in the universe. None of that pays off because nothing builds to that. There's no hints, there's no foreshadowing, there's no drop on that. And so when we get that answer of who she's related to in the Star Wars galaxy, it doesn't feel earned, and it feels very weak. Yes?
So you just said it must go off, but does it have to go off, or can we make it and change the story without it going off?
It depends on what you want to do. So it doesn't have to be a physical gun, James. Okay? Chekhov's gun is simply a metaphor for something that if you include it in the story, it needs to have a payoff. Okay? For example, if I tell you there's a bomb in the room, okay? That bomb, either someone needs to discover that it's there and defuse it, or it has to go off, or both. Okay? But if the story continues and it ends, and that bomb is not defused or discovered, and if it doesn't go off, then that bomb is completely useless. Do you understand my point? Okay? Further, if I tell you that in order to become king of Camelot, Arthur has to pull the sword from the stone by the end of the story, but he never does that, he never becomes king.
Useless, right?
Right. You don't want it to be useless. You want it to have payoff. Okay? Next rule. Okay, when it comes to foreshadowing, number 4, you want to include plot foretelling in the outlining stage. Okay? Any bit of foreshadowing, any bit of foretelling should be a part of the story that you scaffold from the very beginning. Okay? So the lowest level is where you want to start that. And as you build the story, as you scaffold up from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, you need to have those events that support it in place. Okay? You don't have to give everything away at the very beginning. You can have it come back into play in later chapters or later parts of the story, but you want to scaffold it. This is where outlining comes into play, because when you outline your story, you're going to develop elements early on, or if you've already written the story, you might think of something that you'll need to go back and find a place where you can include it. Okay? But you want to make sure that your foreshadowing is part of the plot, it's part of the outline from the very beginning. Foreshadowing is all about intentionality. Any questions so far? We got some feedback. Okay. Am I good to move on, or someone still need a slide up there? No, you still need a slide?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
All right. Rule number 5, you don't want to overdo it. All right? Too much foreshadowing might tip your hand too soon. Think of it as playing poker. You don't want to give everything away all at once. Make plot clues subtle and only become apparent on rereading the story. So I've actually gotten back into watching one of my favorite online web series. It's called Red vs. Blue. And it's a machinima animation based on the game Halo. So they use the multiplayer game engine to animate and film these characters. And it's the beginning of the series is really quirky and goofy and dumb, and everything feels disconnected. But when you start watching through every single season, you actually see things that are threaded in from beginning to end, and it is done so masterfully. Some of, like, it never even clicked in my brain. Like, the first 5 years of the show was in creation. Like, I had no idea that the things that they were setting up were going to have a much bigger payoff, because they were thinking long-form storytelling than short-form. What started off as these little 3 to 5 minute video clips on YouTube turned into masterfully done storytelling with really fun, fleshed out, quirky characters that turned out to be far, far more intense than I actually realized. And it's really kind of cool to watch that play out. But what they do is they don't overdo it. Things that, and we'll come to this again when we're talking about red herrings, but one of the things that they do is they don't overdo the foreshadow. In fact, they foreshadow things, they layer things, and you don't even think anything about it. You're like, okay, that's a little bit of information, cool, that served for the purpose. But then later on, you find out it serves a much bigger purpose than you realize. All right? For example, one of the characters, his name is Church. He gets blown up by a tank, and it turns into this joke where everyone thinks he's just a ghost. And he goes and he like inhabits other characters' bodies, and he's able to do that. And later you find out that there's another character who can do that. He's an AI. His name is Omega. And Omega is able to inhabit other characters' bodies, take them over, and make them do what they don't want to do. And he's an evil character. So you have two different characters introduced in the same season who have a similar ability, and it never dawns on you that one is a ghost and the other one's an AI, but really the first one is actually just an AI, and Omega inherited that trait from Church. Yes, no. Yeah, go for it. All right. Well, if he needs to use the bathroom, there's one in there. Yeah, well, if you need to take a break, you're fine. No, don't worry. So you want to make sure that your plot clues are subtle and only become apparent on rereading or rewatching the story. All right. Number 6. Make the plot payoffs fit their buildup. Okay? If you hint at a big event reveal in your story, the payoff should be as big as the buildup. Good example, Luke's vision in the cave on Dagobah. Okay? When Luke has when Luke is on Dagobah, he's training with Yoda, and he goes into the cave and he has this vision. What he foresees is his fight with Vader. But what that vision tells him is that he is like Vader. Not only is he like Vader, but later on, he has to face Vader and face the truth of who Vader really is. And Vader is his dad. And sorry, spoiler alert, that the movie's been out for over 40 years. So that becomes a good example of the foreshadowing and the payoff, because even though we as the audience watch that imagined fight between Luke and Vader in the cave, and Luke wins at the expense of worrying about he may be destroying himself, or he may be having to face the truth of who he really is. When we get to that fight at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and he has to fight Vader, it's a losing fight. He's not winning. It's going against him. And at the end of it, he finds out not only has he been fighting one of the biggest bad guys in the galaxy, he's been fighting his dad the entire time. Mind blown. Bad example, and I'm jumping back onto the whole thing about Rey and her parents. That whole example is terrible because, again, we have all this great setup, and then it gets destroyed for us one film later. And then later on in the next film, we're given this huge reveal about who her parents are, but it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal. And so the fact that she goes from being Rey, no-name Palpatine Skywalker, doesn't feel like she's actually developed as a character. All right? So rule number 7. This is going to be more for those of you who are doing the revision process. But you want to use the revision stage to add or fix plot links. So if you are missing something in the writing or drafting phase, you don't need to worry about that, because eventually you're going to have to go back through and you're going to have to reread all of that. Okay? You may not have made the connection as a writer. There have been times where I've written something in a story and I never made that connection until I went back and I started rereading and doing the revision process. And I'm like, oh, hang on. And because of that, that prompted a revision. And I'm so glad that I actually wrote 3 of my books first before publishing the first one. Because as I was developing stuff for my 3rd book, that came back into play in book 1, and I was able to make that revision before I ever went to publication. There's a common saying in film and television: you can always fix it in post. And that's what I want you to be thinking about. So you can outline everything, you can scaffold everything at the very beginning, but you as the writer may forget something, and it may not click with you until you're in that revision process, and that's perfectly fine. Okay? So don't plan on putting everything in the outline or in the story right away. Be willing to revise and edit. All right, rule number 8. Get feedback on your foreshadowing. Okay? This is why movie studios will do test screenings with test audiences. This is where writers will do beta readers and alpha readers. If, as the writer, you can be so it shouldn't say if. That's a typo. I apologize. I did not go back and revise my slides. So as the writer, you guys can be immersed in the world and the process that you might miss something in your story. It is entirely possible that as you're writing something, you will miss it. Beta readers can help you identify those plot holes. Okay? They can help you identify where things work and where they don't. They can help you identify where you can strengthen the story and where those weak points are. They will help you find those parts of the story's armor to refine it and to strengthen it and to improve it. One of the things I should have done with my first book is I should have given it to someone to read through all the way before I went to publication. Because now, 10 years later, it will be 10 years in February since the book was published, I'm in the process of doing the narration for the audiobook, and I'm having to reword and restructure sentences on the fly as I'm recording because things don't make sense, because my editor, my original editor, did not do that great of a job going through the editing process. And so when I went back through to do the edits myself, I missed a bunch of stuff. Now, I will be doing a re-release at some point, but I should have had a beta reader to help me find all that stuff. Because one of the comments that I'm getting in the reviews I'm getting on Amazon is that there are some typos, which I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I'm like, doggone it. Missed that. So make sure that you are getting feedback from other people. One of the things I do with, like for example, when I'm doing the writing competitions through NYC Midnight, I will call it my best friend, because I know that while he might have some partiality for me, he's going to give me as much of an objective response as possible, because he's a heavy reader, and if the story doesn't sync well with him, he's going to let me know. So I will call him up and be like, hey, I need you to listen to this story. Does it sound good? Does it sound right? And I'll read it to him, and he'll be like, here's what you should do. And I'll usually listen to that. But I want to touch on this idea of plot holes. The word plot hole gets thrown around a lot, especially on social media regarding movies and stuff like that. And they tend to miss the definition of plot hole. The definition of a plot hole is a gap or an inconsistency that goes against the story's internal logic, rules, or character development. Okay, that's what a plot hole is. Okay, a plot hole is not something that seems like it's weak storytelling. I mean, it can be weak storytelling, but but it's more of an internal thing than it is an external thing. All right? For example, if I have a character who starts off being super awesome at everything, and then they can't figure out how to tie their shoes, that is inconsistent with who that character is. Because I've already shown them to be an expert at something like maybe quantum physics or engineering or computer sciences, and they can't tie their shoes, which is not that difficult. Okay? If I write fantasy. If I establish rules for how magic works in my series, and then I break those rules, that becomes a plot hole. I'm going to jump on Harry Potter again for just a moment. One of the things that they do very well in avoiding plot holes in the story is that there are rules for how magic is done. Not everybody can do magic. Okay? Not everybody who comes from a magic family can do magic. But you can occasionally have people who are non-magical who are capable of magic. That being said, the rules for magic, for the most part, are consistent. In order to use magic, you need to have a wand. But in the third movie, in Prisoner of Azkaban, there's a character sitting in the leaky cauldron who is performing wandless magic. He is sitting at a table reading Stephen Hawking, a book on quantum physics, and he is just pointing his finger at his tea and stirring the spoon without a wand. He's not speaking a spell. I don't even know if he's thinking of a spell because his brain is distracted by reading quantum physics. That is the scariest wizard in the entire wizarding world ever, because this guy understands quantum entanglement in a way that Voldemort could never do. James.
About your not tying the shoe, what if you spent all this time learning that stuff so you wasn't able to learn how to tie a shoe?
Okay, if he was that smart, he would have found something else to make his time more effective by either getting Velcro or slip-on shoes. Come on, if he's that smart, if he can understand all those different cool things, he's not. Don't get me wrong, there are characters who are so smart they have no concept of social structure. Case in point is Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. He is incredibly smart, he has multiple degrees, book smart, up the yin-yang. But his social cues are missing. That being said, he still knows how to tie his shoes. Alright?
Do you mind if we also, when the class is done, do you mind if we just paper?
Yeah, go for it. It's all yours. So this jumps into one of my favorite quotes from all of cinema. No, Mr. Green, communism was just a red herring. This comes from Miss Scarlet from the movie Clue in 1985, which is a movie chock full of red herrings. And here's what we're going to be talking about. Because red herrings, all right, if foreshadowing is about dropping hints for your readers to come to a desired conclusion, red herrings intentionally mislead. All right? The whole thing is about a distraction. You want to create a distraction. Yes, James?
Isn't red herrings a fish?
Herrings are a type of fish, but in this case, we're not using it literally. We're using it metaphorically. Okay? A red herring, because most herrings are white fish. Okay? If you see a red herring, it's distracting you from the real thing. Do you understand? So a red herring. So foreshadowing is dropping a hint that matters to the story. A red herring is a hint that deliberately misdirects your audience. You want to throw them off the trail. Okay? Red herrings are false clues designed to mislead, to distract, to expect an outcome that won't happen. I'll give you a moment to look at that. No, are you good? Okay. So, this might be a character who seems evil but isn't. A character who seems evil but isn't. One of my favorite Johnny Depp movies is a film called The Tourist, where it's about Interpol is hunting this mastermind thief who stole millions of dollars from a criminal organization, and he's being hunted by the criminals and their mob boss leader. He's being hunted by Interpol, and he goes through and has an entire face change. But in the meantime, he's partnered up with someone who he knows for a fact works for Interpol, but is trying to double cross him because she's a cop. And the entire time we're introduced to this other character who seems to be listening in on the conversations between Johnny Depp and Angelina Jolie. Yes, no.
For like classic misdirection, does it also mean like a character that seems nice but isn't
Yes.
nice and it's
You can reverse that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, like the witch, you know, like the nice witch and like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
She's actually evil because I saw a bunch of these shorts about where she said that you had the power to go back to Kansas and Dorothy didn't know. She should have-
Well, we'll come to that in a moment. But so like as I was getting at this is that this idea of The Tourist is that they play off this idea that Johnny Depp's character is just a teacher from Middle America, that he's on vacation after a divorce. He's trying to quit smoking, and it's this case of mistaken identity. Meanwhile, there's this other character who's always where Johnny Depp's character is, and the camera keeps giving you this idea that he's really the mastermind behind everything. But then at the end of the movie, what you find out is that Johnny Depp was in fact the mastermind all along, and the other guy was the tourist. So the title has a double meaning, and they keep giving you this misdirection of who you should be worried about. All right? Another example, an object that seems important but isn't. Okay? This is where the quote I read to you just a moment ago from the movie Clue comes into play. So in the movie, which takes place in the 1950s, during the height of post-World War II, during the height of the Red Scare, where everyone in America was worried that someone next door to them would be a communist working for the Russians, there's all this talk amongst all the characters at this dinner party. So murder mystery is happening. The guy who hosted the party is dead. They're all being blackmailed because of their shady past and their shady dealings. And several of the characters are intertwined because of either being involved in a weapons project, being involved in politics, possibly being involved as a communist. And so the whole idea that they might have one of the characters might be a communist spy trying to steal secrets. And that's all this is about, is stealing secrets. Everyone keeps thinking that. It's a misdirect. Communism is a red herring. No one actually was a communist. It was just a bunch of blackmailers trying to get their information back from the person blackmailing. And that's what leads to everything. And so that becomes a misdirect. So you keep thinking as you're watching this, holy cow, this is, one or more of these characters is a political spy. All right? But it could also be a physical object that could be the misdirect. Okay? Case in point, in Harry Potter 6, the Half-Blood Prince, one of the big things that they're looking for is they're looking for Horcruxes. They're looking for this locket. And the locket they find, they think, man, this is it. This is the big thing. Come to find out, it's a fake. It is an absolute fake. It has no purpose other than it was a replica. It was meant to deceive. It deceives Voldemort, who's the main antagonist. It deceives the heroes. It deceives the readers. Because then you're thinking, all hope of finding that locket is lost. All right? It could be an event that seems significant but isn't. Okay? And it could be any event. It could be a party that can be significant. It could be a birthday that can be significant. It may not be as significant as everyone makes it out to be. The point is to distract. Okay? Or it could be a clue placed by someone that goes down the wrong path. You see this happening with detective stories all the time.
Like Sherlock Holmes?
Like Sherlock Holmes, or you might see it at being a fake clue in something like Indiana Jones.
I didn't know Indiana Jones was a detective. I thought
He's not a detective, well, kind of. He's kind of a detective of history. Okay? He's an archaeologist, but when he's searching for some kind of hidden treasure, he's going to find clues that lead him in one direction, but maybe the wrong direction. Okay? So, for example, one of the clues that he has to deal with in Raiders of the Lost Ark is looking for the ancient buried city of Tanis. Okay? And while the Nazis are looking in one area, he actually figures out that the clue that they have been going off of actually led them in the wrong direction, and he actually ends up finding it. So while he doesn't get distracted by the wrong clue, his opponents are. Okay? So when we're thinking about how we want to misdirect, you want to make sure that what you're doing is meant to enhance the plot. It needs to be something that can distract your audience, or it can distract your characters. So this is where we're going to get into our how we're going to incorporate red herrings. First, you want to incorporate the red herring into the very fabric of your story. Just like with your foreshadowing, you want to make sure that this is something that should be planned from the very start. You need to scaffold it in as early as possible. Okay? And maybe this is the inciting incident. Maybe this clue, this wrong clue, is the thing that sends the characters in the wrong direction. Or maybe it comes up later on. Okay? One of the best ways to do that is you look at the resolution. Okay? You look at the conclusion that you want your readers to get to, and you work backwards. Okay? But then, and that's how the foreshadowing works. For the red herring, what you want to do is you want to look at the opposite of that. If the characters are supposed to find something or supposed to discover something, start with the opposite, that they discover nothing or they find nothing, and then work those clues backwards so you get to the very beginning. Okay? Think of it as branches of a pathway. Choose your own adventure. You choose the right direction, you're going to go the correct path. But at every choice, there should be an opportunity for it to go completely haywire. All right? Think of it in terms of pathways that lead nowhere. Tip number 2. Give your innocent characters MMO. Okay, this means motivation, means, and opportunity. So if you're dealing with a crime story, like a murder mystery or some other detective story, and you've got a character that you want to be used as a red herring, give them motive, means, and opportunity. So Clue is one of my favorite movies, and I'm not going to give away who the murderer is, but one of the characters in the movie, his name is Mr. Green. So if you've ever played the board game Clue, you know that Mr. Green is a character on the game. Okay? Mr. Green is he's this guy. He wears a nice suit. He wears glasses. He's kind of dorky.
Hey.
That's not attacking you, James. Don't worry.
Wait, why do you not want to attack?
Hey, shh. So, but like the other 5 characters that were invited to this dinner party, he has motivation to do what is benefiting him. Mr. Body, who is the guy who invited him to the dinner party, Mr. Body has blackmail on him. Okay? He has the means. There are times where Mr. Green is not on screen, where he's not seen, he is not heard, he is absent from the scene on your screen. He's also given a weapon at the beginning of the movie. So he has motivation, he has the means to kill Mr. Body, because Mr. Body was hit over the head with a lead pipe, which is what Mr. Green is given. And he has the opportunity at some point to do it. Okay? But he's not actually the guilty party. Now the fun thing is that the movie Clue has 3 actual endings. 3. And each one, the murderer is different. Okay? And every time, everyone thinks that Mr. Green may have done it because of the means, motive, and opportunity. Alright? So play around with that. Tip number 3. You want to give the reader no obvious reason to suspect the guilty character. Okay, this is where you flip the MMO to disguise the real guilty party. This is going off of what Noah was asking about, like if you have a character who seems evil but really isn't, or is good but is really evil. This is where you want to flip that MMO. Okay? If you want to write in the real guilty party and hide them in plain sight, give them no means, give them no motivation, no opportunity. Now they can have one of those, but if they have all 3, that makes them guilty. Okay, that's what detectives look for. Okay, so for example, one of my favorite books that was put out is called In the Hills Above the Grist Mill, and it introduces this character. His name is Hollis, and Hollis is a preacher in this rural Kentucky town called Graywater Ridge. And Calvin, if you are listening to this, hopefully you are. I'm plugging your book. But at the very beginning of the story, when Hollis is introduced, the chapter where he's introduced ends with the phrase that Hollis was a lady killer. All right? There's 2 meanings to that. One, he's a very charming guy. He knocks it out of the ballpark with the ladies. But if you take it as its literal meaning, it means that he kills ladies. All right? And it's a murder mystery. But throughout the majority of the story, everybody knows him as this really kind, really gentle, very peaceful preacher. There's nothing that gives you clues to suspect him. But the author drops it at the very, 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 very beginning. And Calvin, I'm sorry if I spoiled the ending for your book. I apologize.
Who?
What? Don't worry about it.
Who's Calvin?
Calvin, so I'm live streaming this, Noah. Calvin is an author friend of mine who wrote that book.
We're on live stream?
Yes. Surprise!
Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us before?
Because I don't want you to like jump in the middle of the camera and photobomb everybody.
There you go.
All right.
That's because you don't want us to be spied on, right?
Also, yes. Okay, tip number 4. You want to focus your reader's attention elsewhere when you plant clues. Misdirection isn't about withholding information, but giving or focusing on extra information. Okay? If you have a character that is monologuing about something, have them not just give out all the important details, have them give their life story. Okay? Because that becomes a clever misdirect. Because they're going to give so much information that everyone's going to be like, stop talking, I don't want to hear you anymore. They get pushed to the side, they get ignored, and really, what they've just done is they've given all the secrets away. But you as the reader and the character now think that character is completely useless. Okay? You want to focus your reader's attention anywhere else as you plant those clues. Maybe it's how you describe something. That's whether it's a setting or a location where that things are going to hit big. Maybe it's something else. But you want to put things in plain sight where it's not going to register with your reader right away. Tip number 5. Always play fair with your audience. Your reader is giving you their trust. Your audience is giving you their trust. Do not misdirect them just to mess with your audience. Okay? This is where I'm going to harp a little bit on The Last Jedi, but I'm also going to praise the director for something else that he worked on. So, in The Last Jedi, we are misdirected away from who Rey's parents are because she is told by another character, your parents were nobodies. She is told that. She doesn't discover it for herself. She is told that. And the whole reason why is because Rian Johnson, the guy who directed that movie, wanted to completely undercut the point of the story. He wanted to be subversive, and he wanted to flip it on its head and make this character a nobody. Have no importance to the rest of the galaxy. Have no importance to the rest of the story. Everything that you were worried about or wondering about or curious about, it is dropped for the sake of annoying and trolling the audience. He did that deliberately to mess with the audience. Because they had been expecting for an entire film before this that we were going to get some big reveal about who Rey's parents were, like we did with Luke Skywalker in Empire Strikes Back. That doesn't happen. But a year later, Rian Johnson put out a movie called Knives Out. And there is a huge twist in that movie because it's a murder mystery. And we're actually introduced to the bad guy from the very beginning. The very beginning. And it's a subtle clue that you completely ignore for the rest of the film until you start seeing everything lining up and the clues drop into place. There's a character, his name is Ransom. Okay, that is his name. And when you're first introduced to Ransom, when he pulls up at his grandfather's house, the dogs bark at him. Meanwhile, all the other characters, the dogs love. I'll come to your question in just a moment, Noah. All right? And we are given that clue that Ransom is actually the bad guy. Meanwhile, we are shown on screen that his grandfather's healthcare worker, Marta, accidentally, or maybe even deliberately, poisoned him with his medication by giving him too much. And so now it flips from being a detective story of who done it to how did Marta get away with this? How is she going to escape justice? Okay? And as the clues pile up and you see all these red herrings, you're left wondering, what the heck is going on? Did Marta really do this? Or is she still trying to get away with it? Is this just dumb luck? Come to find out, it was Ransom the entire time. Because that one clue that feels like a red herring, and it's actually a real clue. So play fair with your audience. Don't do anything to mess with them. Do something that's going to have payoff. So, Noah, you had a question.
You know when we take a break?
Yeah, we're actually going to be done here in just a little bit. Before we do that, I'm done with my lecture portion. What we're going to do is we're going to have a writing prompt. Okay? And here's your writing prompt. You're going to read the following prompt and continue the story. So anything that's in parentheses, you're going to replace with your own description. So the creature so you're going to rewrite this, but anything that's in parentheses, like the phrase light source, or claw, scale, fin, other, or negative texture or positive texture, you're going to replace those words. Okay? So the creature draws close. It's shadow blocking out the light source. So that could be moon, sun, spotlight, whatever you want to put in there.
So,
hold on, let me finish. And though I'm expecting the worst, when the first claw, scale, fin, other touches my skin, to my surprise, it doesn't feel negative texture, but positive texture. So if I was to write this and be a little subversive on my own, I would say the creature draws close. Its shadow blocking out the moonlight filtering in through my window. And though I'm expecting the worst, when the first puff of air comes from its nostrils and touches my skin, to my surprise, it doesn't feel cold and clammy, but warm and loving as the puppy gives me a lick.
Well,
I've been playing with a new puppy.
What about Black Widow?
That's fine, but I don't want you to replace the word creature with Black Widow. I want you to replace...
Spotter.
No. You're missing the point. So, no, you see the words that are in parentheses? Those words, like the phrase light source, you replace that. So instead of saying light source, you would say like moonlight, or sunlight, or flashlight. Does that make sense? Okay. And if you need help, let me know. I'm going to give you guys about 20 minutes to work on this.
And whoever finishes.
When you finish it, just sit tight, and we'll have a chance if you want to read it and share it. You're more than welcome to. Otherwise, you don't have to. I'm not going to force you guys. Yes.
Does it have to be light that it walks out?
I would prefer it to be. I mean, if you want to change how you go about identifying that thing. I mean, you can change if you don't want to use a light source. You don't have to. But how else are you going to see whatever it is? How are you going to see a shadow in a darkened space? Like if this room had no light source, if those lights back there in that alcove and the lights coming from outside were gone, if it was pitch black, how are you going to see this thing?
I'm getting a little hungry.
I'm getting hungry too now. I've literally had a bowl of granola and that is it. Well, I take that back. I had tea before I came here.
How are you alive?
Because of cellular mitosis. I don't know how to answer that question, James. All I know is I'm alive. Yeah, no.
Can we use something like tail also?
Yeah. I mean, are you coming to the point where it's like saying claw or scale or stuff like that? Yeah, you can change that to the tail. I'm just using those as examples.
Can we add to that?
However you want to rewrite it and add to it, you're more than welcome to. That's the whole point of the prompts. You can have fun with it.
After, can you tell what creature it is?
I mean, if you remember my example, like I said, there's a couple. Because I don't know, it's just sort of you laugh, but she's a little ball over. Her name is Amy. And she's like 5 pounds.
I love this cat we found him. It was a good
Nice.
done.
Awesome, no.
The creature draws.
Hold on. We're not there yet. We still have other people who are still writing.
Okay, what's in that room?
I have no idea. I would imagine it's like some kind of utility closet or where people are put when they don't pay their library fund. I don't know.
I don't think libraries do that, do they?
No, they don't.
I'll go look. Yeah, it's a closet. I was expecting there might be a kitchen where I could get a snack.
If they have a kitchen in the building, it's probably for library employees only. This is probably part of work. Careful. The tables aren't stationary.
Why is it struggling? Why is this struggling? You want to know why and why it's special? I don't know, so I think it's gonna I'm screwed.